Cody and I have wanted to talk about this for a while.
Yes.
And you and I have this great thing. Not only do we share a birthday.
We do.
November 8th, shout out.
Woo!
Okay. But I enjoy talking to you about current events and things, even just away from, what we're going to talk about today, just because I always feel like you hear me, I hear you. We're always able to have just a good conversation where I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Or you're like, oh yeah, that's
different
good,
perspectives are good.
Yes, they are good. And I'm not saying I have a different perspective on this, but I'm just saying I got to play the role of it's my responsibility to ask you the hard questions.
Deal, do it.
And everybody knows that you're vested in this, in these pets, because you are a meteorologist and this affects your industry. So having said all of that and being completely transparent, we know that in the last couple of months, many people, hundreds of people, we don't know exactly how many, have lost their jobs. We're talking about, and you'll break this down even more, but the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, has 6 offices under it. One of them, National Weather Service, another National Hurricane Center. So these have sort of become the targets?
Yes, more or less. Admittedly, this is really complex and complicated, and admittedly, we could spend the next 8 hours talking about this. Yeah. Nothing about the government or kind of the checks and balances, the red tape of government is easy. So I'm gonna talk about as much as I know. Okay. So let's start with the National Weather, the NOAA. So this is several of the main offices. You have the National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Services. So that covers all your data streams, your satellite information, all of kind of the technology side of things.
So under NOAA, that's one of the
That's
offices.
one. It's called NESDIS. By the way, National Weather Service and NOAA, we are obsessed with our acronyms. There's a lot of them. I'm sure a lot of jobs are. So then you have the National Marine Fisheries Service. So that's part of it. You have the National Ocean Service, which deals with oceans. It's pretty obvious. You have the National Weather Service, which is generally atmospheric sciences. Then you have the Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research, which encompasses pretty much all the research they do and includes climate research, weather research, really anything in our atmosphere, or basing kind of on satellites and how we can measure the atmosphere and what's happening. And then you have the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations. So this doesn't just include here at ground level, this is the atmosphere, which also includes aviation. So they have a large hand in what is decided and forecasted for our aviation community, which is 50,000 flights a day here in the U.S. alone. So there's a lot involved in this. That's the 6 offices. Then you have branches underneath that.
Oh, okay. Which, don't worry, we won't get.
Well, I want to highlight a couple.
Or we will. Okay.
Yes, because we talk about this actually for TV weather a lot. So you have the National Integrated Drought Information System.
Oh, okay.
So that's not specific to the National Weather Service, but it is a branch underneath NOAA. And so that information actually comes from a different office. Okay, so you have experts in their very specific fields. Okay. Then you have the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations, which I already just talked about, and that goes hand in hand with the Weather Service because you need weather forecasting for aviation. Then you have NOAA's Environmental Modeling Center. That is computer models. That is where all of the computer model data is engineered and stored and recorded. And that's going to come into play when we talk about kind of the data centers and how that's playing into some cuts coming up a little bit later. So that's underneath the NOAA branch. Okay.
Can we, before we because we're going to focus on National Weather Service, because that's your area of expertise. Before we do that though, set the table for us. There are also private entities that do weather forecasting or do some of these things. Okay. Can you help me understand that?
I can try. So obviously you have the government. So admittedly, clear as day, we're a private entity. I mean, we work for Fox. So that is anything you see on television that isn't the National Weather Service, it's a private entity. But we work hand in hand with the National Weather Service, and literally any private entity works with the National Weather Service because, like we talked about with the data center, they have all of our data, every single bit. So you open your phone, stand by, I'm going to find it. So we have our Fox 9 weather app. This uses all National Weather Service data.
Okay, so could you do your job without that? Okay.
You can't see a weather app without the National Weather Service.
Okay, but what if what if it was privatized completely? What if the National Weather Service was completely privatized? And you still were able to access that information, it just wasn't funded by the government.
If it's privatized and they can keep the lights on, sure. But it's not necessarily the act of privatization. Mm-hmm. It is the act of how to get there when weather keeps going every day. Mm. So the National Weather Service has basically integrated itself, like it should, with a government entity. They've had a 100-year head start. I mean, the National Weather Service has been around for 100 years, literally a century. Right. So it's integrated in everything we do. Like most private companies, there are some exceptions, don't have computer models. That's all through the government. They don't have weather sensors. They don't have, there are no private companies that I'm aware of, and granted, there's some, can't think of the word I want, when someone has private company has the rights to something and you essentially have a DNR, like do not talk about.
Oh yeah, non-disclosure kind
non-disclosure.
of thing. Yeah.
So like private companies don't have to disclose what they have. So honestly, some of the private companies may have this, but we don't know.
Okay.
And so how do you solve something that you don't know what you have? So let me run this down. So the National Weather Service owns and operates 18 weather satellites. Some of them are billions of dollars, which they are publicly funded, yes. 92 twice daily weather balloon launch sites. We need weather balloons. We can't just have surface observations because the atmosphere is three-dimensional. Mm-hmm. We can't just take observations here at ground and call it good. You have to know what's up there because that's where all of our weather comes from. You have 159 Doppler radar systems, which all need obviously power. They all need oversight. They need engineers to fix things that go wrong. You have nearly 10,000 weather monitoring stations. We call them ASOS stations. So it's, again, I told you we love our acronyms. Automated surface observing stations. So that's where you get your temperature, your dew point, your humidity, your cloud cover. All that stuff's all automated and goes into like the weather service, like their data center. Mm-hmm. And so all of that stuff automatically populates and it goes into our computer models. It's already set up and then it's disseminated from there. And because of the Freedom of Information Act, however long ago that was issued, we as the tax-paying population, so the commoner, we can access all of this data. All of this data is on the internet. Mm. You can go see it. Everyone can go see it. You have to know where to look because you have to go to the website, but it's all public information because every single one of us pay for it. Now, here's the thing and here's the rub, and I know the next question is going to be, is it worth the funding? Let me just pull out my wallet. So for one whole year, every single person, I'm going to make this as dramatic as I can, every single person pays roughly this. For the National Weather Service specifically. $4.
Okay. Every adult in the U.S. pays that much.
Well, I mean, it's 330 million Americans, so that obviously includes children.
Yeah.
But you know, the family of four times four, the family is paying $16 a year.
Okay.
For the National Weather Service. So essentially $16 a year to view what we show, because we use 98% of the stuff that I show on television is from the National Weather Service. Now, every private entity makes it look different because they want their own look.
Right.
It's all the same data. Now, there are exceptions. There are exceptions to every rule. Fox, we actually have our own computer model. It doesn't have the database to go off of because it's only been around a few years.
Yeah.
And the way computer models work is it needs as much information as possible. It needs as much climate information as possible, and then it actually takes that into account when moving forward. So there's a lot of complex science, extremely complex science, and to be honest with you, I don't understand a lot of what goes into a computer model. Could I do the math? Sure, but it's not my everyday job. I can't do that.
I want to make sure and ask you about this.
Yeah,
It's not the first time that our government has tried to come in. So it was back in 2011. It was the Obama administration, Republican-led House, I believe it was, wanted to go in and make a lot of cuts. At that time, would have cut, I think, 30% of the National Weather Service budget. It didn't go anywhere, obviously, but again, it's not the first time. And I think the criticism at that time and the reason that people wanted to, some people wanted to do it, is they said basically, and let's see, let me get in here.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to find my notes.
They're basically saying the technology and what we're doing, technologically, has just left the National Weather Service in the dust. That we have gotten to a point where privatizing this and having private companies take it and own it would increase, competition, which would bring prices down on some of this technology. We'd get, the best possible technology because we're not worried about government red tape and going over somebody's head in an agency, that kind of thing. So there were a lot of reasons that somebody wanted to, that Republicans at that time wanted to go in and chop this up. So I think, it comes back to now, and we say, well, now the budget's even more bloated, or, it is a lot bigger. Are there places to cut that? I mean, is there some middle ground here, or do you feel like you are already cut as thin as possible, and now we're talking about, we see people sounding the alarm, like we're going to lose lives because of this. We're going to see.
To be honest, my answer to that is I don't know, and I think when you're talking about funding, when you're talking about money, there's always going to be 1,000 different perspectives. Yeah. And there are going to be biases in the corporation because people want to keep their jobs. There are going to be biases out of the corporation because people want to stop spending money. I will talk specifically about the National Weather Service. NOAA, I don't know all of the ins and outs of NOAA to speak educationally about that. I can say, if you look at the budget overall for NOAA, it has gone up and down a little bit over the years, but it has been persistently, and again, I'm not an economist, so this is an opinion, but from my viewpoint, it's been persistently lower than inflation. So it's not going up as much as you may think.
Okay.
And to say that any company out there can give us the same private or the same public information in our everyday lives for $4 a year, I mean, is laughable, honestly. Like, I don't see how you can do that. Does that mean it can't happen? No. But again, how do you transition when we're going into severe weather season, for example? Yeah. How do you transition from the National Weather Service incorporated in everything to then going privatized? You can't just flip a switch. The infrastructure is not there. Now, hypothetically, if you want to say, hey, in 10 years, get ready, we're going to go privatized, all these private companies line up and see what you got. Okay, that might be doable. I did want to quote a couple of things, and I need to find it.
Okay.
So give me 1 second.
We need another couple of hours, Cody.
Oh, I know.
We look at all these notes we have.
Oh, I know.
Well, and we have to wrap. And I know you're going to just wrap us here. But
give me like 3 more minutes. So Brian Norcross, who's actually a hurricane expert with Fox Weather, did some of the first wall-to-wall hurricane coverage from Hurricane Andrew, a very famous hurricane because of the devastation it made in Miami in 1991. And so he went before Congress actually in 1995 when one of the first times that this came up of Congress wanting to privatize the National Weather Service. And I'm going to read a quote from him because I thought it spoke volumes. And one of the reasons why it didn't move forward is because of his testimony. So he says, quote, "Public safety is one of government's core functions. We don't want critical services farmed out to the lowest bidder. Rigorous standards and public accountability are the cornerstones of any public safety system, including the data gathering, forecasting, and warning systems executed by the National Weather Service. The profit motive has no place in the baseline weather services that Americans rely on every day. We should not be a nation of haves and have-nots when it comes to weather forecasts. A family farmer deserves the same alerts and expert predictions that the corporate farms up the road rely on to make critical decisions," end quote. I think that sums it up very nicely. And when you talk about the National Weather Service standards, they issue our watches and warnings. the forecasts from us, from the private sector, from your Foxes, from your ABCs, from your NBCs, will all look a bit different. But we all have a standard of severe weather coverage. The National Weather Service has set the standard for severe thunderstorm warnings and tornado warnings. If that were to go public and the National Weather Service no longer have a standard, then suddenly there are all these elements of ABC issues a severe thunderstorm warning for this storm, but not this one. Now Fox is issuing for this one and not this one. So suddenly there's all of this confusion. Plus, do all these private companies now charge every single person a fee to get weather warnings? If there's a tornado bearing down on your front door, you're going to want to know about it. The fastest solution and the cheapest solution for $4 a year is the National Weather Service and the current setup.
Okay, and I know we have to wrap, but I guess then just my follow-up to that would just be, what if there was a government contract for one private company and they all came to the table and we picked the one that made the most sense, was going to be the cheapest, maybe saved us a bunch of money, and they figured out a transition period where they could do it smoothly. Would that be?
Everything is possible.
Okay.
But how do you make that decision?
Yeah.
Who makes that decision?
Okay. Okay. So we're going to leave you with this, because there's a lot of this, right?
There's a lot of that.
A lot of that. But thank you for taking the time to just walk us through kind of the structure of everything, and so we can understand a little bit better. This is our music to wrap up.
This is the rap music.
And I want to thank my mom. And no, stop the music.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. I appreciate your time. Won't be the last time we talk about this kind of thing.
No, I'm sure there's more to come.
All right.